Hello and welcome to this preview episode of Shouldn'ta Come. This is our episode about Peter Dutton, the opposition leader. We'll be launching our series in proper next week with an episode of Anthony Albanese, but for now, enjoy us trying to figure out how audio works.
How short is Rove? Rove is pretty short. Surely Rove is quite short.
Let me get Rove's height for you.
What is Rove, like 5'5"?
Rove McManus height 5'8".
5'8".
You know,
See, you're taller than Rove. How tall's Grant Denyer?
Grant Denyer height.
Beautiful.
Grant Denyer height. He's 5'4.5".
Fuck yes.
Damn, you gotta be short if they tell you the half.
Oh, there it is. Yay. Vape acquired.
Alright, everyone, I found my vape. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Yanni.
You ready to talk about Peter Dutton?
I'm so excited.
I mean, you know, people are entitled to their sexual proclivities, you know. I mean, let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom. But I ain't spending any time on it. But I ain't spending any time on it. But I ain't spending any time on it. Let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom. But I ain't spending any time on it.
What do you know about Peter Dutton?
The main things I know about Peter Dutton is that he just kind of looks fucking scary. He's
a scary looking guy.
He kind of has scary opinions.
He has scary opinions too, yes.
So, you know, he really, you know, you look at him and you're like, yeah, that guy's probably no good.
I would say that's pretty much what I knew about him. He hates immigrants.
He sure does.
He hates women. He hates the gays, but not that much.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of falls into his, like, right-wing stance, where it's like, this is just another box you have to tick, you know?
Yeah.
He's not in it like that.
No.
But he does have to say, yeah, I hate gays.
Yeah, he hates the gays. And, did you know about his, like, copness?
I knew vaguely that he had cop history, but I know nothing about, like, what he copped, or, like, you know, how did he cop?
And he did cop, I'll tell you that. He copped a
Gosh.
lot. We're also going to get so many sounds of the street next to our house. But, alright, we're going to get started, I suppose. Welcome to Shouldn'ta Come, a podcast about why. I'm Yanni.
And I'm Kieran.
We're here to talk about Australian politics and why you shouldn't take it seriously. You should be upset about it, and you should be angry about it, but you shouldn't take it seriously. On the face of it and under the surface, it's just a bunch of clowns in a joke car.
Yep, 100%.
But I'm going to start our episode on Peter Dutton with a paraphrased quote. Peter Dutton eats bleeding heart lefties for breakfast. He is tall and bald with a resting death stare. His eyes, two brown beads, see evil so that the weak can be blind. His lips are allergic to political correctness. Peter preaches the gospel of John Howard with the fanaticism of Paul Keating. Dutton's raison d'etre? Do you know how to say that word? Raison d'etre? You know, apostrophe E. Anyway, make Australia afraid again. That's his big thing. And offer himself as a serious strongman for the age of anxiety.
Damn. I mean, the start of that was really romantic for some reason. It was just like, yeah, Dutton's turgid member hates boats and the people on them.
He gets a no-boat-ner.
Stop the boners.
Stop the boners. Well, this is the intro and a little bit of the body of Lech Blaine's recent article, Bad Cop, the 119-page essay about Dutton's strongman politics that makes up the skeleton of this episode. Blaine's article is one of two historiographies, I'm not sure if that's the real word, of Dutton that I referred to for this episode, and the other was written 10 years ago by Madonna King for the Sydney Morning Herald, named Good Cop, Bad Cop. I guess in the time between the articles, he answered the question.
Yeah, he picked which one.
He picked which one. Dutton's copness is a through line in his public persona, and obviously in his personal life. He was a police officer, there's no stolen valor here. But it's not the driving force in Peter Dutton. And it's not the driving force in the Dutton legacy, which is one that dates back to early Australia. Dutton's family have been here for a while.
How long?
Well, okay, so this is Australia, so
I obviously not,
like 230-ish years.
Oh, so long.
230 years, 1797, so we're getting on to 230 years. Merchant Captain Richard James Coley was born in London. Well, that's actually when he was born. Was born in London in 1797, and he followed his father into the seafaring merchant career. Sometime in the 1830s, he migrated to Australia. So, a bit under 200 years, yeah. He's
All right, vibe.
He's younger
I
than
suppose.
baseball, I think.
Damn.
And he ran a shipping business that never had any cash on hand. So you couldn't really take credit. And that was his main reason for having to move from Tasmania to Sydney and eventually to Brisbane, where he bought one of the first private dwellings in 1843. Richard is a shopkeep and an early property developer, and as an example of how things change, he had an amazing flip in 1859 when he bought Section 191 in North Brisbane for £124 and sold it later that year for £350.
Hoo-wee.
£350. I mean, in AUD, that's like $700.
Hey, what's that in today's money?
It's about £41,000, about $80,000.
All right, well,
Like my hexstat plus your hexstat
you know,
for a house.
but he also bought it for like, what, I guess?
124, so about £40,000.
Yeah. Nice.
That's my thoughts on that.
Anyway,
Richard had a colourful life in Brisbane's early real estate, farming and banking circles. Described in one article as a founding father of the city. After the colony of Queensland was created in 1860, Richard was named the first Sergeant-at-Arms, which is more of an honorary position than anything, giving ticks to certain things where it's like the Sergeant-at-Arms opens this race field for the people.
oh, is it like a early kind of government style position? Is it just
Early,
like
yeah.
this is the guy that approves shit, or
The
is
guy
this
that
the guy that
approves
just
shit,
like
yes.
certifies shit or whatever?
Exactly, along those lines. In 1861, he provided evidence in this capacity, stating that his confidence that the Whiteside poisoning massacre of roughly 60 Indigenous people had been carried out intentionally, the suspects having bragged to him about poisoning roughly 70 Indigenous people.
So he's
He's like a famous rich guy in town.
and he's like, oh, you guys poisoned a bunch of Indigenous people.
Well,
No. Which is surprising from a Dutton.
He gave evidence. So
Okay.
he basically the people are dead. A bunch of Indigenous people have died from poisoning, and the police officers who did it are saying they must have eaten some food incorrectly or whatever. And
You know how it is when you and 70 people that you know just incorrectly eat food at once and all die?
yeah, there was like an arsenic outbreak in the food.
Yeah, rat poison got in here. That's crazy.
It's crazy how they imported all that. And basically, Dutton's ancestor is there to provide evidence saying, like, no, they came up to me and they were talking about, like, yeah, we poisoned like 70 Indigenous people. It was
me.
great. And he provides evidence about that. He was Sergeant-at-Arms until the 12th of September, 1864, when, over lunch, he shot himself in the head with a pistol.
What?
Oh, sorry, dinner. Over dinner. Not over lunch. That'd be weird.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not great either way, but I feel like a lunchtime choice to commit that act is, that's a statement. But dinner makes more sense
Dinner
to me,
makes more
actually.
sense, actually, now that I think about it. In my head, it was lunchtime, but I've written dinner. Either way, over a meal, he had some guests over. He walks out.
Wait, he did this in front of the guests?
No, he did it while the guests were there. They went out and discovered his body after he'd shot himself. He was like, just a moment.
You ever have a dinner party and you're like, actually, fuck this?
So actually, these are my least favorite friends. I don't want to...
You know, I've got a great way of never having a dinner party again.
I don't think there were many more at the estate. And his son Richard also killed himself by taking strychnine in Roma in 1872.
Damn.
Richard Sr.'s daughter, Martha Ann Alice Coley, married C.B. Dutton in 1865, which is where we get the Dutton last name. Charles Boydell Dutton, a squatter in colonial Queensland and an early member of the Queensland Legislative Assembly, is the Dutton of Dutton Park, the suburb in Queensland, in Brisbane.
Wait,
Yeah.
That's actually named after his family?
Yeah, that's named after Peter Dutton's great-great-great-grandfather?
Holy shit.
Yeah, he was a pretty important guy in early Brisbane. He married Martha Ann shortly after Richard's death, and the now Duttons were described by a fellow squatter as warm protectors of Aboriginals from anything like cruelty and injustice, and by the press as quite happy to exploit their cheap, nasty labour. Nasty's the word that the press uses. I don't know what that means. What do you think nasty labour is?
From a historical context, probably something just like absolutely horrendous. From a modern context, like, oh, I'm just doing some nasty labor. You know? Like, that just sounds kind of fun.
I just have to do some nasty labor for a couple of hours, and then I'll see you at the pub.
Yeah, you know?
I'll see you for a drink. Charles wrote letters to the Sydney Morning Herald about the cruelty of native police against blackfellas, and ended up buying a 3-acre block in Brisbane. One of his servants, Indigenous girl, was known for being able to speak the King's English rather than Pidgin. I didn't really know how to work this into the story. Like, I don't want to sound like, hey, he taught...
wow, he taught her English. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And the proper way.
But it's perhaps
God's way.
Yes. It perhaps is reflective of his belief about Indigenous people being different to the prevailing belief of the average white Queenslander at the time.
Yeah, I suppose progressive for that point in time, in that I guess he wasn't trying to poison anybody.
Yeah,
that we're aware of, you know?
He sees their indigeneity as redeemable, which is, I suppose, progressive from their indigeneity is why we must kill them.
Yeah. It's not.
Charles's son, Henry C. Dutton, lost his money in the 1902 drought. Selling his family's properties, he ran a station in northern Brisbane. His son, Henry C. B. Dutton, was a linesman in Hendra, who raised his beautiful baby boy, Bruce, to lay bricks in the Catholic way.
I'm sorry, I need more context. What's the Catholic way?
No, he's just Catholic and he lays bricks.
Why did I think that was like way that you could like religiously lay bricks? You know, I think it's because it sounds so much like, like laying pipe the Catholic way, just like missionary.
Yeah, you lay bricks
I'm a
the Catholic
missionary
way.
bricklayer.
You put one brick
I can
down.
only do this when I'm married.
You hit it turns into 12 bricks.
You just don't use protection when you're doing it.
Every early source about things from the 70s or whatever just talks about what denomination people are. And
critically important.
His father is always described as Catholic. So Bruce is the father of Peter Dutton. Peter Craig Dutton.
His middle name's Craig?
It's Craig.
Huh. Is that what the C stood for in all of those others?
I think it was Charles for at least a couple of them, because it was Charles Boydell, and I think Henry C. Dutton is Charles.
That makes sense.
But at some point it became Craig. And he was born Peter was born in Boondall, about 15 kilometres north of Brisbane. Boondall? Boondall?
I think it's Boondall.
He was born on 18th November 1970, making him a Scorpio.
That is so accurate. Scorpio Queen.
Yeah, okay, Peter Dutton, Scorpio Queen, the new book by L. Ron Hubbard. He was born to Bruce and his wife, Alicia, who would go on to have 4 more children in their radically mixed-faith household. Dutton is much closer to his Anglican mother, who was described as an Anglican secretary. Those are both in the same paragraph. All sources, including Dutton himself, but most notably his mother, describe him as shy, not involved in student life at all, and essentially invisible. He seems to have been a hustler since day one, having a paper run in primary school, chopping meat as a teenager, which he admits in his Annabelle Crabb interview was perhaps not legal, and mowing lawns for some side money.
All right. Reasonably industrious.
He's like an ant. Peter Danton. Dutton's childhood was shaped by stressful financial discussions at the dinner table, a recipe for the very well-adjusted adult we know today.
Oh, God.
Changes to laws or whatever by Keating's Labour government had stressed his parents' building business. We'll probably get to Keating one day.
I know actually nothing about Keating, so that would be handy.
There's a musical about him. Well, you will have to watch the musical.
Oh, yes, okay.
Although his parents were still able to scrimp and save to send him to St. Paul's Anglican College. His mother describes him as having always been a very responsible, straight-down-the-line person, with a steadfast belief about right and wrong, and after his time at high school he went on to study business at the Queensland University of Technology, enrolling in 1989. When you're 10?
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm 10.
As he began uni, his parents divorced. They'd been waiting until he'd left school.
That also makes so much sense as to his character as well. Like, hot tip, don't stay together for the kids.
No,
They'll end up like Peter Dutton. They'll be all fucked up.
And he is. He blames their divorce on Paul Keating and
Okay, yeah, for sure, yeah.
and the sitting Labour government's policies about small businesses or whatever.
Yeah, you know.
I didn't care enough to read about what. Now, you know this story. Peter Dutton's in his first year at uni, and you know he's going to be a politician at the end of the day. So what's he going to do while he's at uni?
Is he going to join student government?
You're close. He's going to run for federal parliament as a Liberal for the seat of Lytton.
While he's in uni.
18-year-old Peter Dutton gets absolutely tanked. Turning a safe 16-point seat into a safe 22-point seat for Labour.
Wow.
He also fails 4 of his 6 classes.
Wow.
Beginning a decade-long journey of occasionally failing accounting at uni.
Hell yeah. I mean, who among us, you know?
Yeah, Dutton is slightly more relatable than I thought he'd be. And one of the things was when he said afterwards, like being asked about it, I never did like accounting.
Fair enough. Man's right. It's
He's
shit
right.
subject.
Terrible subject, very boring. At some point he drops out of uni and begins a fun side quest. Triple side quest. 1, he's chair of the Bayside Young Liberals. 2, he enlists in the police force. And between shifts, he works in the building business with his father. This is right after the 1989 Fitzgerald inquiry into police corruption, which found, no way, police corruption.
What? No.
The first officers after the inquiry are described as driven by loyalty and a dogged insistence on procedural correctness, as it seems like there was some more oversight for a few years after the inquiry that found police corruption. Dutton was no exception to this. However, this doesn't reflect a better behavior by police out in the field. The inquiry was much more about corruption within the ranks, but Dutton seemed to be regarded as a bad cop, one of the LA Noir coppers. All of his police pals says he loved doing it, he relished it, he really loved, putting his thoughts about right and wrong into action on the streets.
That's a really safe and healthy combination.
And he's only been a cop for less than a year, in September of 1990, when he pays $93,000 for an apartment in Yerongo.
Okay.
Which he flips for $116,500 in 1992, 2 years later. That year, in 92, he marries his first wife, but they don't even last until he buys a house in Maroomba Downs in 1993, getting divorced after 5 months of marriage.
Wow, 5 months.
His description's a bit, I'll read it to you. And yeah, so we just came home one day, not in love anymore, and that was the end of it.
To the point, I suppose.
Yeah, he's often described as somebody who has a lot of stress and anxiety hiding below the surface. And so I'm imagining somebody so tightly wound up just being like, and we weren't in love anymore. And that's the end of it.
Like, I was about to make a Bobcat reference. This is not the episode for it. But
I
I ain't going to waste any more time on it.
I mean, that's the theme song of the podcast. It's always allowed. We're firmly in the heartbroken Sigma Dutton era when, in May of 1994, 6 QPS officers abduct 3 Murray boys, aged 12, 13, and 14, in Fortitude Valley, where I work. Yeah,
Jeez.
just down the road. They sort of threatened to cut their fingers off and took their shoes, leaving them in a swamp somewhere. The boys hitchhiked back to, the mainland, as it were, and the officers involved were put on probation for 1 year.
Hey, don't try to abduct kids and chop their fingers off. That's hey. We didn't have any of that in the book, okay?
We didn't ask
Your training
you.
didn't cover this. Look, I know you want a promotion really badly. Don't get caught next time.
You can't tell a 12-year-old that, hey, this is the place where they cut off fingers and look at him knowingly, which is what seems to be implied is what they did.
Oh my god.
These 6 officers are known as the Pinkemba Six, and one of them, Mark Ellis, comes up a lot later in this story when he runs for One Nation in 2017 or so. I forgot to put it in the actual script, but he's a friend of Mark. Peter Dutton is a friend of Mark Ellis's at the time. He is in court supporting the 6, and there is no evidence that bad cop Peter Dutton had anything to do with the events of that day. There are persistent rumors regarding his involvement in the case, which I will not continue to spread here. However, there is no evidence that Peter Dutton was involved with the events of that day. Still friends with one of the cops, though.
Wow, what a turnaround from his ancestor, I suppose, you know?
Ancestor went from providing evidence about police violence to Peter Dutton cheering. Apparently they all chanted when the not guilty plea was read out.
That's so fucking sickening.
Yeah, it's sickening.
Oh, slay? Oh, slay!
So in October of 1994, the same year, when he's 24, Peter was one of the detectives working on the case of a 10-year-old girl who'd been raped and beaten by Sonny Paul Graham. Dutton took the lead in finding him, holding a rough identikit image assembled with the help of the girl-stricken brother scouring nearby blocks, according to King. Eventually he found Graham after doing some paperwork, detective, trailing the suspect, LA Noir
Detective
thing.
shit, whatever.
You know, looking at tenancy agreements in the area. Graham, a New Zealander immigrant of Maori descent, was described as a victim of his own circumstance and alcohol. He was sentenced to 12.5 years with possibility of parole after 5, which Dutton describes as devastating in how low it was. He focused his hatred afterwards on the city-slicking, bar-passing, cocaine-sniffing lawyers that got Graham off. Later in his career, George Brandis says that, Peter Dutton had never liked lawyers, would probably never like a lawyer. It's one of his strengths and weaknesses.
And that, I think, comes directly from being a cop. Like, cops and lawyers, even though they do work in the same system, I suppose, are, just not pals whatsoever.
I mean, we know this from Law & Order.
We know this from Law & Order. And, Law & Order would never lie to me.
Dun-dun. The descriptions we get of Dutton from friendlier press paint a best-case scenario style of cop, who was particularly renowned for his work in the sex offender department. Described as being... In the Special Victims Unit, Peter Dutton is described as being quite empathetic. Very good with victims and held in the highest esteem by their families. Very dedicated to catching the baddies. He said in a recent interview that he's never had a gun pulled on him or fired a gun, but he's had knives pulled on him and has drawn his gun in response. Another source, Jazzbag4183 on Reddit, says his dad says that Peter Dutton was a sniveling dog back then, as he is now ass-sniffing fuckhead start to finish.
Oh.
In 95, he sells the Maroomba Downs home for $175,000, making $115,000 on the sale. Later that year, he purchases a home in Mount Cotton for $45,700. And he picks up a hobby. The unsolved, extremely grisly 1973 murder of toddler Deidre Kennedy. This story sucks, but is also really frustrating to hear in an exasperating way. A local man, Raymond Carroll, who had a reputation for biting young girls, had been linked to the case due to bite marks on the child's legs that apparently matched his overbite.
Wait, he had a reputation for biting young girls?
Yes, that's how he's described. Known for biting young girls.
Oh, old mate down the road. Oh, the tall one? No, the one that bites girls.
The bitey girly one. Raymond, girl biter.
What the fuck?
He has an overbite. Dental analysis, I think, is regarded as pseudoscience, like bite analysis, but I think there's a lot more tying him to this case. I'm not actually going to comment on it.
Than just, seeing people with bite marks and being like, yeah, that guy with the weird teeth did it.
That's what the whole thing is about. He'd been convicted for the murder in the mid-'80s, but he'd been let out on an appeal due to lack of evidence. Dutton was part of a group of cops grinding on the case, surveilling the guy, and he was finally back in court in 1999. So double jeopardy had protected him thus far, but the state was able to prove that he'd lied in the first hearing, so then they were trying to get him for perjury rather than for... They're doing...
Just put him away somehow. We just have to find
Yeah.
some sort of, like, loophole or some sort of thing.
Exactly, tricky-dicky legal stuff. But no dice. Carol was free to bite young girls long into the future. Something that the toddler Deidre, Kennedy's uncle, is also accused of doing.
Right.
Yeah, there's another, like, known young girl biter who might have done it.
What the fuck was in the water?
Lead?
It probably was lead. Yeah, it was probably lead. But, like, what the fuck?
We don't know which of the young girl biters killed this toddler.
Fuck.
It could have been Raymond, or it could have been her uncle. Shortly after this, Dutton leaves the police force. He achieved the rank of Detective Senior Constable and doesn't speak much about exactly why he left. In 2019, the ABC describes it as a 20-year mystery. What's agreed on is that on August 4th, 1998, there was an incident involving a car chase where Dutton rolled an unmarked car while in pursuit of an escaped prisoner. He was pretty fucked in this incident. He had a concussion, some broken bones, had to spend some time in hospital and on bed rest. And a document that was released or uncovered, it's kind of unclear, but the ABC frames it as having not been released and then released in 2019, says that he retired from the police due to having lost confidence in his driving and sought damages from the escapee after the fact for injuries and stuff. He talks about having a sort of PTSD or a mental hangover from this time.
Like, fair enough. You know, you get into a really bad car accident. Don't want to fuck around with cars anymore. That's fair.
That's what he says. There's a lot of controversy about this, even though, like, that story's wholly believable to me, but it'll come up again. Do you know what capital gains are?
Not very well, because math is hard.
But
Money is scary.
Reason it out. What do you think a capital gain is?
You get money from having assets?
Yeah, pretty much. It'll probably never come up for us unless we
thank God.
acquire some capital to get gains on.
Probably not then.
But if you're selling a home and you make a profit, that profit can be taxed, which is a capital gains tax. Johnny Howard discounts the capital gains tax by 50% in 1999, which makes flipping properties much cheaper.
Oh, okay. So then it would be so much more lucrative to do that.
Exactly.
Because you'll get to keep more of the amount you make on the property.
Exactly. Dutton and his bad Dutton and his bad dad. Bad cop Dutton and his bad dad. Dutton and his...
That's my favorite children's book.
Have you heard about Jason Tatum's new children's book, Baby Dunks a Lot?
No.
He's got a new children's book. He was on Jimmy Fallon, dressed like Mao Zedong, trying to... He's just in all green.
Okay, I was like, wait, what? Run it back. Tell me what, I need more information.
He was in Jasian face. Jasian.
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, Dutton and his dad buy up properties and turn them into childcare centers, leasing them to a company and hiring a gang of people to work for them. He says about 40. Dutton is rich, 30, obsessed with John Howard, and looking at the seat of Dixon with dollar bills on his dollar bald head.
Hell yeah.
Are you excited for Peter Dutton's political career?
Yes and no. I am excited to learn about it. I think this is going to be kind of fun. But also, I really don't like Peter Dutton, so I feel like everything more I learn about him, I'm just like, damn, that's another thing to keep locked up in the old membranes.
How do you feel about him thus far in the story?
Thus far, I feel like I have a greater understanding of him, and probably I see him less as that kind of cartoonish villain that I saw before, but I still think he's a piece of shit. I guess I just have more context around it now.
Yeah, he often describes his time in the police force as being just surrounded by sex crimes specifically.
Which will fuck a person up, let's be fair.
Yeah, it comes up when he doesn't sit in on the apology, which we'll cover later, and it colors his reaction to the world. He is quite crime-focused, and his telling of things is that there's just crime everywhere.
A very black and white morality, I think.
Yes, that comes up a lot. So Peter contests the seat of Dixon in 2001, and his opponent, Cheryl Cheryl encouraged a journalist to ask Dutton if he really lives in Dixon and why he left the police force, which seems to have struck a nerve. Dutton was running on a law and order ticket, specifically on drugs, and Howard and senior police gave Dutton a lot of positive press for his record. At the time, it was said that he resigned from the force to help the family business, and described the question about his leaving the force as offensive and preposterous innuendo. Kim Beazley eventually requested that Cheryl withdraw the comment. Do you remember Kim Beazley?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the Labour leader when we were young, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
During the election, Dutton had a relationship with a woman named Rachel that broke up before the birth of their daughter together. This didn't get brought up in the political mudslinging, despite Dutton apparently racing up to Curnow outside a public library in a van and getting out of it yelling at her in a car park.
What the fuck?
Yeah, he's really doing a real attack on Curnow, calling her all manner of things, and no one tells her, like, oh, he's splitting up with his out-of-wedlock partners, having a baby or whatever.
You know what? If he was like, if I was her and he was doing that kind of shit, I probably would want to keep it on the DL that I knew shit too. I'd be like, well, I made a suggestion that he left the police force dishonorably and he went fucking insane.
That's a good point.
And so, yeah, I think maybe I should just shut up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking politics, you're thinking Cheryl.
Yeah, I'm thinking, damn, Cheryl, same. Like, yeah, if a crazy man is just going to start being insane, what am I going to do? Like, poke the bear?
What if I accuse him of something that I definitely know about? Oh, this is old, like you are hiding a child.
Yeah, and he's just like, all right, and just drives a van into her house or something. Like, I just feel like there's, yeah. No, I get it, Cheryl, I get it.
That's a really good one. That's a really good point, because I was thinking, like, if only she knew, but maybe she did. Either way, Dutton really fucked her uncle in this one. He got 46% of the first choice votes, and then 56% on the two-party vote.
Damn!
To cap off a happy campaign, Dutton meets his future wife, Kirralie, on the trail. She was the personal assistant to Serena Russo, now one of Australia's richest women. She's worth about $250 million.
Oh, fuck.
She was recently roasted for a life advice TikTok.
Sadly, last week we had massive floods, once in a 100-year flooding, and it caused massive devastation. But you know, when things are going wrong and the endorphins are low, this is the time you have to exercise. In fact, I really believe that fitness is everything. You know, you can say you're successful, but if you're not fit, you're overeating, you're, addicted to food.
Your attitude determines your altitude. See you at the top. She's all about, she's like Italian, and she's like, you have to exercise. You have to exercise. And then you will be a millionaire. She's a property mogul. That's the...
God, yeah. No, this is just like another case of that, like, hey, nobody wants to work these days.
Exactly.
If you actually put in the effort, you could be rich too. All you need is a small loan of $1 million.
Just like me. Dutton rides his luck, his attitude, to his altitude, all the way to the top during his first year in politics, selling a bunch of refurbished childcare centers to ABC Learning, and leasing some of the others to keep lining Peter Dutton's pretty pockets. It's with this heavy wallet that he makes his maiden parliamentary speech. Now, did you have a look at this one?
I did. I saw some highlights from it.
What do you make of it?
You know what? I think he's almost exactly the same now as he was then. I think it's kind of refreshing to see, in a sense, that while I disagree with basically everything he is, I'm like, damn, well, hasn't really changed in the last, 20 years?
Yeah.
He's still that bitch, you know?
He is still that bitch. He's got less hair.
He does have less hair, though.
His speech is very individualistic. He says that the silent majority are fed up with the Civil Liberties Council and Refugee Action Collective and the dictatorship of the trade union movement. He describes them as obsessed with the rights of criminals, yet not compassionate to victims. His older Australians are hiding in their houses, scared of professionally operated criminals stalking the streets, threatening the fabric of our society.
Damn. Doesn't he also mention in that speech, he talks about how there's, families with, 3 generations who've been on the dole and they just don't want to work and this place is blah, blah, blah.
Yes, he does, and now that you mention it, so did my high school economics teacher.
Peter?
He was also bald.
Oh my god. I'm connecting the dots.
I'm going to have to call him. Later that year, he sells the Mount Cotton property for about $202,000, meaning
Okay.
he made $150,000 on the sale. And he buys a house in Albany Creek for $280,000.
How many houses has this man owned so far?
So in the
Like-
story, I've got 4,
4.
I think. But there's, I think, more.
We don't even own 1.
No, we won't ever earn one. Unless he gives us one. Maybe he really likes the episode.
Peter!
He can give us the shopping center he owns in Townsville.
That'll be alright.
His daughter Rebecca is born and he gets engaged to Kiralee, who he's going to marry in 2003. The Albany Creek house he bought in 2003, he sells in 2004 for $445,000, making $160,000 on it, using that to buy an acreage at Camp Mountain for $710,000. So, going to the 2004 election, he's in peak guts. His opponent in the election, Craig McConnell, doesn't even come out of it with a Wikipedia page.
Damn.
Dutton takes 52% of the first preference and 58% of the total vote, still his best election result to date. This is the Mark Latham election, with his handshakes and the crazy rightward turn and his fantastic quotes. Howard absolutely vulcanizes him in the paranoid mining boom post 9/11, we have to support America's efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan, Australia. Bullying Latham's plans to defund some private schools into a 39-28 seat split, or whatever. However that works.
Nah.
But he wins. Dutton ends up on the backbench. Do you know about the backbench?
Yeah, so vaguely. The backbench, I guess, is like what? People who don't have a portfolio but are still, like, senators or whatever?
They have less important portfolios.
Okay.
And then the front bench have important portfolios.
Yeah.
Do you know about the crossbench?
The crossbench, is that like, what, like independents and, you know, smaller parties and that kind of thing?
Exactly. And so apparently in Australian discourse, people are just all referred to as frontbenchers now, as politicians. It's like a term for politician, but Peter Dutton's on the backbench. He's the Minister for Workforce Participation, whatever that means. But his real role is a head kicker. He'll fucking say it, cuz. He'll fucking say it. Which is essentially how we came to know about him.
Yeah, that's true.
When asked a question by Michael Keenan, MP for Stirling, he sneak dissed the previous MP's bowel cancer. It's great to have a live member in Stirling, he said to Michael.
What?
Perhaps cuntier, Penny Wong asked him how women without Year 12 educations would be expected to find jobs and thus receive welfare under his proposed work for the Dole-style policies.
Well,
And
Penny, it's not that hard.
Well, that's what Peter Dutton says. Dutton says, the Labour Party should stop talking down to people just because they don't have a university education.
I mean, he's right, especially at that point in time. Like, come on now.
I think Penny Wong might... I don't know too much about Penny Wong's background. I'm not going to sneak diss her. But Peter Dutton definitely understands that the media hears what it hears.
Yeah.
And if you say it, it's true. Especially if the person listening likes you.
Yeah.
And he understands the media in a way that Penny Wong certainly doesn't. And Labour in general doesn't, except for maybe Paul Keating. The head kicker, bad cop, old-timey dairy farmer's kid persona belies his true passion, causing infighting. In Australian politics, this is called wedging, which sounds like a fun little game. It also distracts from his potential conflicts of interest, with the amount of money that ABC Learning's founder continuing to pay him and the Liberal Party, all while the Liberal Party passes big old rebates to childcare centres.
Wow. Not the self-serving interests. Oh no.
Self-serving interest rates.
Hey.
In 2006, Peter, accounting failing Dutton, becomes assistant treasurer of the country.
Oh no, Peter, no.
He's successful at promoting work choices, the Kid Boo of Howard's career, how to make things better for employers. However, the unpopularity of work choices, racist comments about Sudanese migrants, interest rate fuckery, and Kevin Rudd's cheeky smile saw Labour run up a 23-seat swing to take up the 2007 federal election 83-65.
Kevin 07, baby.
Kevin 07, baby. First Kevin, then Barack. We got a new world coming. That's what it felt. It was
First I want the whitest man imaginable, and then a black man. Hell yeah.
make him a fairly Dutton keeps his seat, although he sees 7 points stripped off it to take 46 in the first preferences and just 50.13 in the second. Really close.
Damn.
Only 217 votes separated him and Fiona McNamara. He could have been erased to history after one term. Now, after 2007, Dutton gets to be in opposition and he is made for it. The opposition leader at this point is Brendan Nelson, who I met once or twice.
Oh shit. Yeah.
Real slimy guy.
Yeah.
He said he wishes his daughter could marry Ned and/or Josh from Australian Capital Territory Breakfast Radio.
You know, really big goals.
They were on the sides of buses. So in 2008, he's Shadow Minister for Resources and Tourism. They just kind of rename people all the time. And he travels to Israel. Later that year, he does an interview with Australian Jewish News, where he said the trip strengthened his resolve that Australia must continue as a true friend to Israel in a hostile region. This is right above an ad from the Zionist Federation of Australia that seems to be written in papyrus. He then famously walks out of the chamber during the apology to the stolen generations, saying he didn't see how it had helped kids who are being raped and tortured in communities in the 21st century. Which is his brand, and also what he spent his 20s dealing with, partially, I guess.
Yeah, like from a certain perspective, I can absolutely understand why he'd be like, hey, this isn't good enough. But that also just feels like an excuse because he's kind of just a fucking racist.
He is, I agree. I think it's why it works as a brand, though, because you can see that story. And if you didn't know that Peter Dutton almost always operates in bad faith, you could believe that story behind somebody who's not necessarily evil.
Yeah.
But this is Peter Dutton. In the lead-up, Dutton does some fear-mongering about the apology. He says it could open up the reparations bill for about $10 billion.
Yeah, oh wow, so the apology, it's not going to help anybody, except for the part where I'm scared about reparations and $10 billion of helpful money could go to people. That's so stupid. Money has never helped a community.
Who was going to get the $10 billion then? Just Noel Pearson?
Fuck it, you know?
Kathy Freeman?
Hell
Is
yeah.
that it? Who, anyway, he doesn't, he's the only member of the front bench that abstains from the apology. And he doesn't like to lose. It makes him anxious. So he shapes his life to ensure it's never a possibility. He's always on guard, he's fiercely private with his family, and his favorite punching bag is a voiceless immigrant. So, looking at Fiona McNamara, who'd run him so close in 2007, he decided he wanted less of a challenge. McPherson, a seat in the Gold Coast, nowhere near Dixon and Brisbane, has always voted Conservative. From 1949 to 1972, it was a Country Party seat, and it's been a Liberal Party seat since then, except for a few months in 1998 when the sitting member converted to the Christian Democratic Party for a few months.
Okay, so still, you know, in terms of left, right, swing, the same.
Yeah. In 2010, Karen Andrews was seeking selection on a Women in Industry Liberal Feminist ticket, and in the final pre-selections, non-resident Dutton was rinsed 75 to 59. He requested specifically a easy seat for election, which a few people described as boys' clubs. Apparently there's an idea in the Liberal Party that women are better in close seats because they actually like to talk to people and people like them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Whereas, if you're just an awkward fucking guy who loves politics and you're part of the boys' club, it'll be like, oh, well, make sure Peter gets a seat.
Yeah,
I want to hang out with him some more.
Exactly.
Whereas, fucking Linda or whatever, no, she's got to earn her place, you know. And women are so much more able to talk to people.
We want to play to your strengths. Don't put us silly boys out there. He probably didn't need to be so scared. When the 2010 election rolled around, he vaulted off the back of a 6% swing to take the seat by 10%. The LNP, Liberal National Party, gained about 7 seats in the election. Gained exactly 7 seats in the...
I mean, it depends on the day, you know?
Depends on... There's a lot of seats in Australia, it's hard to know. They ended up tied with the Labour Party on first preferences. These seats were mainly outer suburban and provincial electorates, Dutton's people. Labour ends up aligning with the Greens and some independents to form a slim 76-74 minority government. Julia Gillard becomes Prime Minister, a faraway warning shot of the current Tealdal wave. Do you like Tealdal wave?
I do.
Dutton keeps on punching while he's in opposition, trying his best to keep up with the latest up-and-coming social media. A tweet in 2011, "You dirty lefties are too easy."
Fuck. Okay, Dad, calm down.
I mean, I am, but that has nothing to do with you, Peter. The LNP relentlessly campaigns against Julia's vagina. Peter plays his role by taking a shot at Craig Emerson, a former partner of Julia Gillard, something that has come up in both episodes of this podcast so far. Different partners. I hope there's a third one for next week.
Hell yeah.
In 2012, as Madonna King tells it, Dutton commented on ABC's Lateline, "Craig has obviously been very close to the Prime Minister and he's a defender of his leader and I understand that." Emerson says it's called loyalty, to which Dutton retorted, "Well, it obviously goes beyond that."
It's loyalty. You fucked her. Very loyal.
Yeah, he'll say it. At the end of the day, that is something that someone's gonna say, and once it's been said, it's been said.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, look, he's right. He's absolutely right.
He's willing to break kayfabe for a second and then bring himself back into it.
Yeah.
But enough to say it, and once it's been said, it's been said.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, that's the thing.
He knows how the media works. Big Tony absolutely pops the lenses out of Kevin's specs in the 2013 election. Kevin did the spill, came back we covered this last week.
Yeah.
With the LNP taking 90 seats to Labour's 55.
Fuck.
And we entered the Little Howard era, where a succession of middle managers, advertising people, and mining types tried to replicate the boom that Australia experienced under John Howard in the first half of the first decade of this century. Of the first century of the third millennium. Dutton is appointed as the Minister for Health and the Minister for Sport, and Tony Abbott's trying to bring back the good times. Easy spending, lots of business, material flowing out, properties flowing up. Dutton seems like the perfect lout to bat back questions about the Liberal Party's incredibly unpopular health policies. Nobody likes them, nobody likes him. Like, nobody likes him. Like, the Australian Doctor magazine says he's the least popular health minister since the fucking 80s. One commenter...
Well, yeah, what the fuck does he know about health?
Nothing, but the point of Dutton there is just to go out and say the unpopular things, because he'll always get his seat back in. But one doctor says he's the dullest, least innovative, and most gullible health minister there's been in Australia.
Icon standard, honestly.
Before the end of 2014, he's reshuffled to be Minister for Immigration and Border Protection, which is where...
Here we go.
This is where Cop the Boats Dutton is born. He raises his eyebrows, probably, at... I mean, how would you know? He has alopecia. I mentioned he has alopecia?
Yes, I did hear that he had alopecia, but I don't think you'd mentioned it yet.
Take Peter Dutton's goddamn motherfucking name out your motherfucking ballot. He's probably raising his eyebrows at the powers given to the immigration minister to cancel visas based on their own discretion. He still remembers Sonny Graham, and still remembers that he hates Maoris. They come over from New Zealand and they have their lack of sunburn and pretty tattoos, and he's still a head kicker cop on the streets of Brisbane.
And this is just a fun new power to play with.
Exactly. He's obsessed with right and wrong, and he's convinced that he knows right and wrong. Around the 2014 reshuffle, he buys a beachfront home in Palm Beach on the Gold Coast for $2.3 million. He was probably nowhere near actually being inside this house when he deported Joel McKay, father of 4 who was expecting a child with his Australian girlfriend. McKay wasn't wanted for anything in particular, but he was a member of the Rebels bikie gang, and that was enough. Before McKay is deported, his friend, Ko, a New Zealand war veteran, security guard to John Key, and stepfather to an Australian child, visited him in prison. Ko, full name Ngati Kanohi Te Eke Hapu, had no criminal history whatsoever, which was a necessity to be granted entrance to visit the Supermax Casuarina prison. But this didn't matter. Ko was also a member of the Rebels, and thus... a bunch of cops surrounded him in tasers while he was taking a nap in his car. He spent 4.5 months with Joel in Casuarina prison, and then shipped back to New Zealand. His partner, Teresa, miscarried their baby during this time. Casuarina prison is known as Australia's hardest prison, with inhumane conditions a frequently associated term.
I'm just in shock. Jesus fucking Christ. I remember hearing about the deportation stuff, and I remember hearing about this case in particular, where it's like, you know, father of 4 being booted out of Australia. Fuck. I didn't have all the detail, though.
Yeah, a lot of the cases of people deported aren't even people who've come here recently. We'll get to it in the story, but he'll deport people who have almost no connection to New Zealand. And he's wielding the stick of deportation like a gat. The voice of reason in the room is not who you would expect. It's Barnaby Joyce.
How is it Barnaby Joyce?
Well, he says to him, if you don't have enough evidence to charge them in a court, how can you have enough evidence to take away their citizenship?
Yeah, he's right. Look, Barnaby Joyce, another complete insane person, has to be right sometimes.
Yeah, broken clock is right twice an episode.
Yeah.
But Barnaby doesn't realize that that's exactly the point. They don't need as much evidence. It's just an administrative decision, so we don't have to justify it.
No lawyers.
No lawyers. Kerr's fuck the police tattoo was enough to get him deported to New Zealand. Similarly flimsy evidence to many Kiwis that Dutton has sent back home since. Dutton claims to always have need-to-know evidence. 60% of the 1,300 New Zealanders deported in the 15 to 18 period were Maori. Dutton's evidence seems to be, well, I know you can't trust the Maori people. At this point, New Zealanders are making up the largest group in Australian immigration detention centres, as according to the New York Times. He also claims at this point that Fairfax and ABC are running a jihad against the government. Now here's a quiz question for you. Who will Dutton let stay in the country?
It's au pairs.
It's au pairs.
It's au pairs.
Do you have anything on the au pair case, or...?
No, but I do remember hearing that there's, like an Italian one and maybe, like, a French one?
Exactly. The Italian one is working for a wealthy liberal donor and big-time sharecropper or whatever. Big property owner. I don't know what a sharecropper is. And the French one works for one of Dutton's old police friends.
Yeah. So he's like, you know what? Even though they've overstayed their visas or they've,
Came
breached
illegally.
them, yeah, they can stay. Hey, hey, my buddy says she's chill.
Well, he apparently decides that as a discretionary humanitarian act to an individual with ongoing needs, it is in the interests of Australia as a humane and generous society to grant this person a visitor visa.
Now that is very interesting given how he has reacted to granting Palestinian visas.
Yeah, that comes up later, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, before we get to Palestine, I guess right around the last time Israel did an attack of Gaza before the last time, Dutton is having a little chat with his best mate, Anthony Abbott, and their mate, ScoMo. They're waiting for the Middle Eastern community leaders to arrive in a meeting about Syrian refugees, and they're being kept waiting a little. Dutton says, they're on Cape York time. The joke being, Syrians, they're late, like Abos, But Dutton knows why, that the coloured people's relationship with time is difficult. Time doesn't mean anything when you're about to have water lapping at your door.
Yeah. That hot mic moment is wild. Like, especially because Scott Morrison in, I feel like proto-Scott Morrison tendencies is like, there's a microphone above us. As they're all smiling, and then they're all like,
It's amazing the amount of absolute ghouls who are having to be the voice of reason to Peter Dutton.
Yeah.
Scott Morrison having to pop out and be like, listen, boys, you can't be like, hey, you guys are gonna drown on a microphone.
Yeah, and, especially, because, my reading of the situation is that, they were having a joke about, this running late. And because Scott Morrison and Tony Abbott had recently been to Pacific Island nations and also far North Australia, they were like, oh, haha, it's Cape York time. It's, it's Port Moresby time. With Peter Dutton chiming in with,
But they don't know about time, they're gonna die soon.
Yeah. The clip is an interesting watch.
Yeah, it's tough. And Pacific Islanders are at this point apparently flooding into Australia, which is a poor choice of words.
Oof.
Junior Togatuki is a Samoan boy who was born in Auckland but moved to Sydney with his family at age 4, and he's due to be deported to New Zealand. He's been arrested at 16 and he served most of a 7-year sentence, so he's 22 or 23. He knows no one in New Zealand. They were there really briefly on their way from Samoa to Australia, and he's suffering from really severe schizophrenia. He'd been arrested for assault and such, but his struggles were pretty well known at this time. During the NRL semi-final, and a few hours after the Cape York time incident, Junior Togatuki slashes his wrist, writes, "God forgive me, I'm sorry" on the wall in blood, tries to call for help but is ignored and floods his cell. Water is lapping at the door of the cell as he's found the next morning, 11 hours after his crisis call. He's buried in Australia, protected from Dutton's deportation drive by his death.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Dutton doesn't really care because right after that he deports a 56-year-old in a wheelchair who'd been in Australia since his 20s. He was in prison because he had been abusing painkillers for his wheelchair-related injury.
Fuck you for being hurt and trying to deal with it. You piece of shit.
No, they gave him an accommodation voucher
Awesome.
for Auckland.
I mean, that's all you need to set up a life in a completely different country with presumably nobody you actually know.
He hadn't been there since the 80s.
That's fucked.
Yeah, the Junior Togatuki story is tough to hear. I hadn't really heard about it at the time.
No, I don't remember hearing about it either, which is just so fucking typical.
Yeah, he knew no one in New Zealand, his family says. Like, he doesn't know anyone in New Zealand. He's basically not lived there.
Yeah, he was there briefly as a baby.
And he was, like, let down by this country, probably let down by cops like Peter Dutton.
Yeah.
Maybe even Peter Dutton, who knows. In September of 2015, Abbott is replaced as Liberal leader by Malcolm Turnbull in a leadership spill, with Dutton being part of the losing 44-54 vote for Big Tony. Despite this, he's retained his immigration for border protection and becomes the ideological head of the conservative wing of the Liberal Party after Abbott's retirement. He adds Lebanese people to the list of untrustworthy Australians.
Oh my god, I saw this as well.
Dutton says the arrival of Lebanese Muslims in the 1970s is to blame for Australians joining ISIS. He says refugees won't be literate in their own language, let alone in English, but they will be taking Australian jobs.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote where he was just like, immigration of Lebanese people in the 1970s was a mistake.
Yes, he calls it a mistake, one of Fraser's big mistakes, he says.
Fuck me.
Dutton's seat of Dixon swings against him a little bit towards Labour's Linda Lavarch, who does have a Wikipedia page. He's able to scrape by on the two-party preferred majority of 51% in the 2016 election. Malcolm Turnbull's Liberal Party gets through by one vote, losing 14 seats to Bill Shorten's Labour Party in the process. We've covered this as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember this election at the time, the 2016 one?
Not really a whole heap. To be honest, I think 2016, everybody was focused on a different election.
Yes, yes.
This one was really child's play by comparison.
What time of year? I haven't written down what time of year it was, but it might have probably been around the same time, maybe a bit earlier. We would have voted. It would have probably been the first election I voted, maybe the second one. I remember it in the air being that, like, oh, Turnbull's not going to be able to pull it out, and it was a bit of a shock that he did.
Yeah. No, I remember that too.
In 2017, Dutton makes some of his strongest comments in favour of preserving negative gearing on properties, as well as the capital gains tax discount. If abolished...
1 moment, please. A short screen break.
Alright, thanks for joining me. Welcome back, Karen. I was just talking with Peter Dutton.
Oh wow, how is he?
Good. However, if we got rid of negative gearing, the economy will come to a shuddering halt and the stock market will crash.
Wow. And this guy failed accounting, you said?
He failed accounting, but his property portfolio was in the region of at least 6 million, including the shopping centre, and his dad has some, and his wife has some, but they might also be part of it. And I don't know if maybe his kids have some, like people do that.
Yeah, people do that.
Like put it in their kids' names. The same year, during the same-sex marriage referendum, he's relatively quiet for his standards, but he advocates for a song against gay marriage to be played at the NRL Grand Final to oppose Macklemore's performance of Same Love at the NRL Grand Final.
I believe he does say that is in the efforts and encouragement of free speech.
Yes.
That if Same Love is played, then there should also be a homophobic song played, because that's just fair.
Different love. When I was in the 3rd grade, I thought that I was gay, because I could draw. My uncle was, and I could keep my room straight. I told my mom, tears rushing down my face, and she said, "That's what people that are different to us do, and we don't want to do that, Ben."
Song of the summer. We love to hear it.
In December of 2017, he becomes Minister for Home Affairs, when the position is created for the 6th time in Australian history. It's a joke of a country, everybody. His responsibilities include immigration, border control, domestic and international national security, law enforcement, cybersecurity and counterterrorism, emergency management, transport security, citizenship and multicultural affairs. Human rights group Liberty Victoria describe him as having the most unchecked power over individuals in the country, including the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He is literally kicking people out of the country just like for funsies.
Yeah, he has.
He's like, I don't like this one, and then just boots him.
He has
like
absolute.
It's nothing.
He has absolute discretionary power, and now he's minister for everything else. To celebrate this, in January of 2018, Peter Dutton says that Victorians were scared to go out at night because of African gang violence.
African gangs. God, that was a moment.
That entered the discourse so quickly and left so quickly.
Yeah, because it was an insane thing to say, especially given, like, I think there were statistics that came out that was, like, 1-point-something% of crimes committed in that, like, time frame in that region were, like, from Sudanese-born people. And it's like, that probably roughly equates with the population of Sudanese-born people there. You're telling me that people do crime sometimes? Crazy.
It was very much nonsense, and, like, the whole gang violence problem is just people not really knowing how to interface with different cultures, and also, open poverty and what it looks like when teenagers don't have anything to do.
And I think, especially for Australia, who really didn't have, like, a big, like, black population immigrating in until more recently, I think as soon as white Australians saw just, like, half a dozen black kids together, they're just like, well, that's a gang.
That's a gang.
That's a gang.
Yeah.
Why else would they hang out together? It's not like they have, maybe, like, similar values and, speak the same language and, maybe they are family members and, a bunch of other things. Why would kids who want to relate to each other hang out together? That's fucking gang related.
I
see a pack of blondes and I think gang.
Gang of blondes. Yeah, I'm scared to go to the shops because of blonde gang violence.
I'm actually really scared of teenagers enjoying themselves.
Well, I am.
In the words of My
They're so
Chemical
cool.
Romance, teenagers do scare the living fuck.
Teenagers scare the living fuck out of me.
Thanks,
Shit.
Gerard Way.
In March of the same year, the Border Force officials staged a raid on the home of the Nuttasalingam family, Sri Lankan refugees who had been in Australia for half a decade, having 2 daughters since their arrival. This was big news at the time.
Yeah.
They were in detention for 17 months, with Dutton victim blaming them the whole way. It's been very clear to them at every turn that they were not going to stay in Australia, and they still had children. Their so-called anchor babies. They spent some time in a Melbourne detention centre before being moved to Christmas Island. A $30 million tax bill was paid to reopen the detention centre for the 4 members of the family, and no one else.
I remember this case happening and being so fucking disgusted. One of the big things being that one of the 2 girls, the daughters, had severe dental infections, and, she was like 4 years old or something.
Yeah,
She was incredibly unwell, and Dutton continuously was like, no, she doesn't need medical attention. Even when doctors who visited was like, she needs medical attention. This kid is seriously ill. If we don't intervene, like, she could die. Like, it's not a fucking joke. Yeah. And, just the idea that there is, like, a literal fucking baby locked up on an island, dying of something so preventable that it would be insane if any kid on, like, to any other family, really, because it's just because of her being part of that family that she was so discriminated against.
Yeah.
And it just, I remember being so fucking sickened by it.
Yeah.
And just, this is good. This reminds me how much of a piece of shit Peter Dutton is, because he is a fucking monster.
He's evil.
And that's like, I don't care about his past, actually. When you contribute to the maiming of a child, who the fuck are you? You're a piece of shit. Like, you are a full piece of shit. And the amount of interventions that had to happen that stopped the family from eventually being fully deported was insane.
Yeah.
Was insane.
And he left Sri Lanka because, like, the previous father, the father of the family, was a Tamil tiger or associated with the Tamil tigers. He was probably not going to be safe back in Sri Lanka. He left for a reason. They were really accepted in their town. It just shows how transparently a lie the police side of it is, because the police force side of it is Dutton protects children. All these kids are getting raped all the time and he has to protect them. But it's not because he cares about children being safe.
No, he cares about finding people he doesn't like and prosecuting them to his fullest capability, which, you know, obviously as a cop was kind of held in check by, you know, law and order, you know, dun-dun.
Dun-dun.
And now with all of these newfound powers, he really can just, like...
And does.
Completely fucking ruin people's lives. And
Yeah.
does so happily, without a single thought.
Doesn't
I
have
don't
a
think
problem.
that bald head has ever had, like, a fucking drop of sweat on it for
No.
any of the horrendous things he's done.
No, he barely even gives it a second thought. He was asked once, you know, how do you sleep at night? And he says, the moment my head hits the pillow. There's something you have in common with him.
Foul. I'm developing insomnia now because I'm sick of this shit.
Okay, well, I'll take your easy sleeping. Well, Sri Lankan babies losing their teeth don't have the melanic advantages of South African farmers, because in March of 2018, like while this is all happening, he says they needed help from a civilized country and should be processed as refugees to Australia.
Specifically, yeah, only white South African farmers whose
Yes.
land was being, repatriated.
Yeah.
Reparations. You know, because Dutton hates reparations.
Dutton hates Dutton knows that it's all about owning land.
Yeah,
Dutton's family knows that it's all about owning land.
absolutely.
And it's not about necessarily working the land, because then a drought will catch her. It's about owning the land. Because, like, at some point ABC Learning goes under. Their payments to Dutton were all up to date.
Yeah.
It's the payments to staff that weren't. The point is you need to own the land.
Yeah.
You don't want to be productive on it. And in 2018, there's also 2 leadership spills within the Liberal Party. In the first one, on August 21st, Dutton wins 35 of 83 votes, and he ends up resigning from the Turnbull ministry. He says he should have won it, but he didn't. 3 days later, he calls for another spill, and Turnbull tenders his resignation. So you end up having a third vote, which is between Dutton, ScoMo, and Bishop. In the first ballot, Dutton wins 38-36-11, but then Bishop's votes get redistributed, and ScoMo wins in the end by 5 votes.
There is a great photo online of how they all look coming out from that meeting. And Scott Morrison looks like fucking jazzed. Like, this man has just been given every Christmas at once. He's so happy. Dutton looks like he's been through a war zone. He looks like, understandably, he's the one who's constantly called for these spills, thinking he's going to be the next Prime Minister, and just, like, gets fucked over on all of them. It's like, it's funny it happened once, it's hilarious it happened twice.
It's amazing how often this happens. I didn't intentionally want to cover figures who keep getting fucked in leadership spills.
But that's just every modern Australian politician,
Turns
to be
out
honest.
that's every story we're going to tell.
It's because they're all backstabbers. They're all, like, they're all bitches.
They're all bitches. And he offers to resign. He stays on in Parliament, and despite questions about whether his family trust should render him ineligible from the leadership, he's, kept around. It doesn't matter about the $5.6 million in funding that had gone from the Commonwealth government to a childcare centre operated by Dutton.
Again, self-interests, Really important.
Really important. As long as the money's paid. All the drama isn't enough to affect him in the 2019 election, where he wins a 54% majority against Labour's Ali France, comms manager, like you, and para-athlete, like you.
Give me time.
The run-up to her defeat is nasty.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Ali's left leg was amputated when a car slammed into her in a shopping centre. The surgeon who planted a titanium rod into her leg, allowing her to walk with a prosthesis, helping her get over her PTSD, was an Iraqi refugee who arrived in Australia in 1999. Dr. Almuderis was the driving force behind her opposition to the refugee policies that recent Australian governments had been pushing. France also talked about the difficulties to find disability-friendly housing in the electorate of Dixon, attributing that to her decision to live in central Brisbane rather than Dixon proper, though she was 7 minutes away. So to this, Dutton says, plenty of people have disabilities in Dixon, and I think they're angry that Miss France is using her disability as an excuse.
Yeah, no, I do remember this now.
He accuses her of being ashamed to be Australian, which would be fine if she said she was, but she retweeted an article about Nauru called I'm Ashamed to be an Australian by someone else, and to be clear. And he says that her refusal to live in the electorate is more about wanting to enjoy the inner city lifestyle. He offsets all this nastiness in a News Corp article with his wife. The headline, "My Pete's no monster." but the sickos who threaten our kids are. Maybe,
Won't somebody please think of the children, as long as they're Peter Dutton's white children?
as long as they're Peter Dutton's white children, and not para-athletes.
Yeah,
My
you know, they've
goodness.
got so many privileges.
She's such a privileged disabled lady. There's so many people with disabilities that are like, just live here, cuz. Look, you have to say it worked. He stays in power, and he's there to send the Murugappan family back to Sri Lanka in August of 2019. They end up back in Biloela, but he tries to make it happen. Hilariously, Barnaby Joyce is on hand to tell Peter that he's perhaps too evil. They're liked by the community. They're not on the dole. They're not on the crime pages. Their kids were born in Australia. You might as well send them to Rwanda because that's another country they weren't born in.
Broken clock.
Twice an episode. In early 2020, he sells the Camp Mountain family home for $1.8 million, making a cool $1.1 million on it. Around this time, he says that Labor doesn't understand the reality of normal people's budgeting. In 2021, he sells the Palm Beach home for $6 million, making $3.6 million of it on it, and is appointed Minister for Defense. Is that spelled with a C or an S?
S.
Ooh,
C.
yeah. Depends what you're talking about. He doesn't really know anything about the military. I'm going to kind of breeze through it. It's a colourful year for the Australian military. The Ida Hobbit Day events had to be seized because Dutton said the Australian military won't do any wokeness. They pulled out of Afghanistan in July, and in October, Dutton committed to back any US defense of Taiwan. He describes the deportation of New Zealanders as taking the trash out, and describes Paul Keating as Grand Appeaser Comrade Keating for suggesting that Australia should perhaps be slightly friendlier with China.
Yeah, that tracks, honestly. Yeah. You know what? Yeah. That's exactly how I thought he would react.
He's in peak Dutton right now.
Yeah.
He's really rolling. It's at this stage that some of the traditional xenophobia short-circuits him a little, though. Because China, he accused them of bribing the Solomon Islands by developing their infrastructure.
Sick bribe. Hey, can we provide you with goods and services that will help you? That's a bribe. That's a fucking bribe.
It's like, there's no IMF loan. That's not real. That's not real.
Yeah, it's just like, if they're not indebted to us, then that's communism.
That's a fake bridge. That's a Chinese bridge. He kind of compares Xi Jinping to Hitler, kind of, and also kind of Putin. Like, he knows how to not say it while saying it. In February of 2022, he calls Albo Xi Jinping's hand-picked candidate. A sizable swing against Liberal was seen in seats with high numbers of Chinese Australian residents in the election that year, with Albo absolutely reaming ScoMo's dad and taking the election 77-58. It also had the lowest voter turnout in modern Australian history, falling below 90%.
Damn.
Yeah. So he's leader of the opposition now. You know, ScoMo retires, and despite Ali France's spirited fight in her second go-around, a 3% swing towards her was not enough to take Dutton's majority. However, he's the last man standing from the Hot Mic trio. He's elected unopposed to be leader of the Liberal Party, taking Susan Ley as his bride, a deputy leader. We remember Dutton going heavy around the voice referendum. At one point, he's accused of counting the votes as... He's accusing the counting of votes as rigged. He's saying it's rigged. He's doing the politics is rigged thing. Aside from his standard ideological disagreements with the recognition of Indigenous Australians' humanity, the voice, we remember, went down roughly 60-40 that year. That success aside, he doesn't seem great at it. We're basically where we are now. He's supported Israel during the war, but so has everyone else, so he gives a fuck. Occasionally, he dives back into culture war issues. He called for a Woolworths boycott due to them not stocking Australia Day plates. Oh no.
The outrage.
They said it's because no one was buying them anyway. Perhaps the most interesting thing that's happening is some revelations of activities by Home Affairs during his time in ministry. Allegations have been made that Dutton's department made contacts with drug smuggling companies, tendered a contract with a company registered to a beach shack on Kangaroo Island, and $80 million in payments intended to the Papua New Guinean government have disappeared.
How do you lose $80 million fucking dollars?
No one has any comment.
Yeah,
PNG
strange.
doesn't know, and apparently neither does Dutton. People don't like Peter Dutton. The Treasurer recently labelled him Australia's most divisive leader, and during an interview with Neil Mitchell, Dutton described Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, as probably a smart guy, but I don't see it, which I thought was a great line. I gotta hand it to him.
Yeah.
It's a really funny thing to say.
Fuck.
So Blaine ends his essay thus. This is Peter Dutton. Tall and strong at first glance, but when you watch him for a long time, you can see that the man is small and scared. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree the whole way. I think he's definitely scared. I think fear and the weaponization of fear is an animating factor in his life, despite however much he himself is scared or if he knows that works. But he does have a cultural strength that is hard for, I think, us to understand when we mainly see his like head-kicking public statements, his record on immigration, and how most Australians don't like him. He's a property developer first, and he will always maintain the value of the ownership of property by any means necessary. While Peter Dutton the cop and Peter Dutton the property mogul are aesthetically contrasting figures, they have the same entity at heart. Peter Dutton, the rich Catholic suburban Queenslander, safe in his ginormous coastal mansion, shaping the world to his whims. And that's the Peter Dutton story. What do you think of him now?
Damn. You know what? It feels really good. I feel like I've actually come right back full circle.
Yeah.
Started out being like, what a piece of shit. And then I was like, oh, I guess everybody's got a past. And now I'm like, yeah, he's still a piece of shit though. So, you know what? That was good. That was good. I feel more informed, and I feel like I am even more justified in disliking him. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like, when reading about young Peter Dutton, I often find myself, like, despite myself when I read about people when they're young, liking them. Like, you tend to write about a child fairly generously, even if you know they're going to be evil. People tend to write about kids fairly generously. And I felt like a little of that with Peter Dutton, but more just... He seems sort of like Bill Shorten in that at 18 he decided he was going to be something. But what he wants to be is, I think, strong in front of people, I guess.
I think you know what, if I'm going to psychoanalyze him, it probably all stems from the fact that, like, he felt a strong lack of control over things as a child, both with his family's finances, with his parents' divorce, and so gaining control and having power, especially over people, I think, would be hugely comforting. Like, being a cop, respected profession. Should it be? I don't know. Respected profession, secure pay, you're in control. Like, you make decisions. You have a unit of people who will back you up no matter what. Yeah. Like him going to bat for his friend who, you know, like...
His 6 friends.
His 6 friends who threatened those kids. Like, yeah.
Stole their shoes.
Hey, you know what? Your colleagues in the police force can't divorce you.
No.
You know? They're with you. They're your brothers in blue or whatever. Yeah. And they do have each other's back. And it's kind of fucked, but that must feel very comforting to someone who's come from a fractured home and a lot of instability.
Yeah, because he, like, the sources all describe him being really upset by the divorce. Him blaming it on Keating comes from a tweet in, like, 2011 that him explicitly blaming it on Keating, but it really shuttered his life a little bit, changed the way he was doing things. And being a cop doesn't seem to really be, like, in his family. Nothing in the sources said any of his ancestors were cops or in law enforcement. They were all in property or working property or working on property.
Yeah.
You know, in various stages of the fortune, you know, grew and shrank through the 5 or 6 generations. But he is... Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, the world changed a lot while he's going from, you know, being a high schooler to being a university student. And he ends up kind of a psycho. And I think what you said about, controlling where people go, like, I think Peter Dutton in his ultimate form is like less big, strong army man, which I think is where people kind of extrapolate him from cop to defense. Defense, from cop to defense. From cop to war, but more like a surveillance matrix. I think his ideal system would be he owns all the land in the country and he knows what's happening on all of it and he gets to decide what people do.
Yes, absolutely. We are all his little Sims and he's just like building little houses, kicking us out, drowning us in pools, you know, whatever.
Yeah, threatening to cut our hands off, taking our shoes. I mean, not doing that because there is no evidence that he was involved. What do you have for us about Peter Dutton?
All right,
tell us what the people want to know.
So, Yanni, now that we know where Peter Dutton's been and all of that, What's he doing right now? Let me tell you.
Jacking off.
Right now, at this very moment, in an Australian home, you can hear the dulcet sounds of Peter Dutton.
Oh. Oh. I'm so sorry. What's he doing? Tell me.
Honestly, he's kind of like doing lots. Like,
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah.
but it's less to do with the fact that he's actually directly involved in a lot of things as it is that he's the opposition leader and that's how Australian politics works. So, as all Australians know, the leaders of the two main parties, Liberal and Labor, have always got some shit to say about each other, particularly when one is in power and one is not. Like, the role of opposition leader, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, is just to hang shit on whoever the current Prime Minister is.
That's it.
Regardless of what they do, regardless of whether you supported a bill or something beforehand, as soon as the other guys are playing, you have to say, oh, actually, they're the worst people in the world, and I would never do that, even though, like, 3 months earlier you said you would. You know, it's just, so he's always got his fingers in pies in that there's always some sort of like, and Peter Dutton, as the leader of the opposition, says blah, blah, blah. And, you know, he's not really like that in it, but he's the guy who has to say the shit, you know?
Yeah, and I think it doesn't really gel with his earlier. I mean, he's trying to brand himself as a lot nicer. Like, remember when he went down with COVID and he was like posing with his dog or whatever?
God, no, I don't remember that at all.
Oh, it's fine. I was excited. It doesn't quite match. Like, he's a head kicker. He's different to strongman.
Yeah, and I think it's probably going to be a massive challenge for his leadership, you know, in trying to run for Prime Minister, because you do have to have some kind of smarm to you, honestly. Like, you kind of have to have a bit of smarm, and I think he is too strictly... Like, it feels like him as a person and him as a politician, they are way too close to being the exact same person.
Yeah.
I think to actually be successful in the way that we've seen other politicians successful, you have to have a curated political persona.
Yes.
And, of course, that can reflect your values and it can reflect your personality, but it is distinctly separate from who you are as an actual person. I don't think Peter Dutton has that.
No.
For good or bad. And you know what? I've got, you know, a good quote here from Michael Hughes, a former New South Wales Liberal Party treasurer. Quote, he's the kind of person you say, I might not like what he stands for, but I won't die not knowing where he stands.
I was trying to... I took that literally at first, and I was like, well, where is he then? But that makes sense. Like, he's not... Yeah, like... He's never hidden any of his
He's
views.
that guy, you know? Like,
is.
you really... There's not a whole lot of depth to kind of go into. Yeah. So, apart from the fact that, he's just generally doing opposition leadership, opposition leadership, there's a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning. The funniest one is the recent New South Wales Liberal local election fuck-up. Now, Yanni, do you know about the fuck-up?
They forgot to be in the election?
Yeah, so the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party had a major whoopsie in August when it missed a deadline to submit 151 candidates for local council elections across the state. So in some electorates, this means that there will be no Liberal Party option for voters. And hilariously, some of these electorates have been considered Liberal safe seats.
Oh, no.
So now they're just straight up for grabs.
But that's not for federal. That's not for the federal election.
No, it's local.
But a bunch of local seats are going to suddenly not be Liberal.
Yeah.
After having been Liberal for a while.
Yeah.
Because
of an administrative fuck-up.
I mean, it seems like administrative laziness, like they just didn't get to it.
Yeah, honestly. And so Dutton was pretty pissed about that. There's been some firings, you know, that usual shit. But I think that's not going to be good for him, especially coming into, like, you know, a federal election.
Yeah.
Like, that's really hamstringed him, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the first thing you'd think is someone would use this to be like, from inside the Liberal Party, this man clearly doesn't know what he's doing. Let me run the Liberal Party, but I don't really know of whoever else.
They've really just been shifting blame onto the actual, like, state and territory party branches. You know, this isn't the federal government's fault. This is specifically the New South Wales Liberal Party's fault.
I'm having to blame the New South Wales Liberal Party for a lot.
Yeah, honestly, but like, yeah.
Worst party in the worst state.
I mean, look, it's not good. It's not good for Duts. Something that is pretty current at the moment is that Dutton is resisting a set of proposed reforms put forward by the Labor Party on reforming the Reserve Bank of Australia. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, so basically the federal government is proposing to create two boards, a governance board and a monetary policy board, which, most importantly, would set interest rates to encourage price stability and the maintenance of full employment in Australia. So, given the cost of living crisis and how Dutton continues to argue that the current government doesn't do anything, isn't doing any, serious work to help combat this, he sure is preventing them from doing something, you know? So basically he's just being like, no. I think Labor and the Greens are currently working on some sort of solution to it, but yeah, the LNP is just like, nah.
Yeah.
Nah.
They won't play ball.
No, of course they won't. Why would they?
It would be weird for them to play ball. Not that I imagine we'll talk about it next week, but I'd be surprised if the reforms are presenting much.
No, it's going to be pretty, negligible, to be honest, but the fact that something that we all know, establishing some boards, ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, so impactful. I'm sure this will change everything. It won't, but the fact that it's already such a point of contention is just so fucking typical.
Yeah, he's doing his wedge stuff. He did it with the referendums, and
yeah.
he's doing it with...
Just hold this shit up until everybody forgets about it, throws it out, and then pick a new thing to hold up, and then
exactly.
Fuck around, and then nothing ever happens, you know?
Yeah, I imagine if... he's made some comments about Fatima Payman. I imagine if more Labour Party members had said anything even remotely negative about Israel, shout out Penny Wong, he would be down their throats about it.
Oh, he was at Anthony Albanese being like, you're anti-Semitic. And Albanese had this big old speech in Parliament being like, I'm not anti-Semitic, but then also being like, but also I don't think children should be killed in Gaza, you know?
Yeah, well, stop all the political support for Israel then, Anthony.
Yeah. You know? Anyway, not the current topic.
No.
And a last little thing that has come recently, and this could be a fun little, treat with what if Peter Dutton becomes Prime Minister? He said, and I quote, "But today I give you this commitment. A Dutton coalition government will be the best friend that the mining and resources sector in Australia will ever have." His plan is to cut the green tape, as he says, remove delays. When somebody puts through a request to block a mining project, a drilling project based on the heritage of the site, on environmental factors, all those kinds of things, he wants to just completely eliminate the order to halt operations when this kind of thing happens. So usually someone will put through a protest and be like, hey, this is a significant site for XYZ. You can't build a fucking quarry here. So usually what will happen is there'll be an injunction and they'll put a stop work order in place so that nothing can happen to that site until a determination is made. He wants to get rid of the ability to put a halt to that.
Oh, great. I mean, they end up doing the quarry.
They end up doing it anyway, but come on, man, don't.
Yeah, it's just.
It's just not good.
When there's something proposing a piecemeal change that won't affect anything, he will spend as much time as he can blocking it up.
Yeah.
And he, I guess, wants to take that time and save it on supporting miners and mining. Let's be clear.
It's not miners. He doesn't give a shit about that.
And it's not miners' fault. It sucks that someone will lose a job or whatever, but that is the fault of a mining company setting up operations somewhere that should be illegal. And it's not the fault of whoever, Johnny Pfeiffer. Want to be clear about our position here. We are pro miners and pro miners. Like kids. We're pro kids. We're pro kids on this podcast.
And I think we need more kids in the mines.
I think we need more. Yeah, we're pro kid miners.
Yeah, let them play in the coal. They'll have fun.
I mean, their lungs will get stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like vaccination.
So yeah, that's just kind of what Peter Dutton's been up to at the moment. But I also wanted to kind of touch on what his portrayal in the media is. And you talked a bit about that. There's a couple other points that I kind of want to discuss, I suppose. So because Dutton is a pretty serious guy, like very no nonsense, there isn't really an equivalent to the Bill Shorten rap that I shared with you on the previous episode. But there are a couple of gaffes that are kind of less to do with being silly and out of touch as they are to kind of parting the curtain, Wizard of Oz style, to see the man behind the machine.
Who is Pete?
You know? So, unlike a lot of politicians, as I said before, Dutton is generally accepted by the public as being, you know, who he is personally, the same as who he is professionally. I shared that quote with you from Michael Hughes. I have another quote from political analyst Chris Salisbury. Quote, "He's seen as the leading light of the conservative wing of the Liberal Party, and he is the go-to mouthpiece for that branch of the Liberals. He's, on the flip side, often likened in appearance to Voldemort from Harry Potter, as well as the common potato."
Yeah, that came up in my chat with him earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did he say about that?
That's because one of his great-grandparents was a potato.
Aw. Yay.
Yeah. That's why.
Potato Dutton.
Yeah, potato. Potato.
Potato.
Peter Dutton. Yeah.
So he's only commented on people making fun of his appearance a couple of times. One of them is calling out appearance shaming from Labour politician Tanya Plibersek after she said, "Well, I think there will be a lot of children who have watched a lot of Harry Potter films who will be very frightened of what they will see at night. That's for sure." She later apologised after a bunch of outcry, but
Tanya Plibersek is always like saying some kind of ham-fisted stuff that shouldn't be a problem anyway, and is vaguely cool, and then just gets shit on for it.
yeah, and then she's got to walk it right the fuck back.
Alright, I'll shut up.
And at another time, there was an infamous photo of Peter Dutton. I do hope you remember it. I'll show it to you anyway, where he looks like an archetypal villain. It was posted online, and the image comes from a press conference in 2016, where he warned refugee advocates not to give false hope after 2 asylum seekers self-harmed while imprisoned on Nauru.
Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about like Nauru specifically, because I think everyone kind of knows the brutality of what went on there, and it, you know, was happening before Dutton and will happen after, but
Yeah, but he certainly has not made it any better. I would argue he's made it quite worse.
he seems to have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his team requested the image to be deleted as it was unflattering. However, this turned the picture itself into a meme. Now I'm gonna show you the photo, and I'm certain you will remember it.
Oh yeah, that one. So for those of you at home, definitely look up unflattering Peter Dutton photo, but his the top half of his head is illuminating, just his beady brown eyes from his nose up. The tip of his nose is illuminating, thus proving he has one and he's not Voldemort. However, otherwise he's jet black, flanked by 2 Australian flags. Their stars, the only thing visible. It's terrifying. It's a scary man.
Yeah, it's truly like, I feel like this picture itself kind of encapsulates how I think about Peter Dutton in my head, is he is this creepy, unblinking, unflinching horror that lurks in the shadows and somehow has supreme control over a bunch of things he has no business having control over.
Yeah, like Aku if he wasn't fun.
Yeah.
Like just the opposite.
Yeah.
Like
straight Aku.
Straight Aku. That's exactly right. Peter Dutton is straight Aku.
Yeah.
To the back some more.
Yeah, but in general, Dutton doesn't really seem to fall into that same personality politician kind of mold that we've seen with his predecessors. Scott Morrison with his relationship in courting the media, and Tony Abbott in that he just did unhinged and unrelatable shit.
All the time.
All the time.
Big time.
However, Peter Dutton is now on TikTok.
Yeah, I saw this on The Guardian.
Yeah, thrilling news. On Saturday, that's the 14th of September, Dutton posted his first TikTok, a piece to camera where he briefly references the very demure, very mindful meme, but mainly talks about the housing crisis and renting. At the time of us recording this, he has amassed 47 likes,
Damn.
13 comments, 6 favourites, and 24 shares.
Wow, he's really not doing numbers.
It's only been a couple of days, so maybe this is the start of, like, you know, a big Dutton social media boom.
Who's are the comments? Are the people raving about it? What are the people saying?
Okay, one of the comments is, aren't you the guy who wants to ban TikTok? Which is true.
Oh, yeah.
It does. Basically, about 6 months ago, Dutton was in favour of a US-style banning or heavy moderation of TikTok. It's xenophobia.
We know. Yeah, consent or whatever.
And just 3 months ago, so even more recently, he came out in favour of banning children under 16 from using social media altogether. Dutton vowed that if his party is elected, that he would have this ban implemented in the first 100 days in office. Interestingly, a report from Statista in 2022 showed that the largest age demographic for TikTok users in Australia is the 18 to 24 age range. The second biggest is 13 to 17. So I don't know what his fucking plan is to get on TikTok and then also, like, ban the second largest group from being on there.
You know,
as well as the fact he wanted to ban TikTok in the first place. It's just embarrassing. Like, don't be, like... It looks weak, and for Peter Dutton, that's got to be like a killing blow.
There's shades of his first electoral experience as an 18-year-old, because the place he ran for, the average age of voters was above 50. So he was out of place as a young person with a bunch of old people talking about young person issues. And here we are. He's an old person trying to talk to a bunch of young people about old person issues.
It's all coming back around, you know?
Well, if that means anything, he's going to lose his seat this election.
We can only hope and pray, honestly. But yeah, he's on TikTok now. Who's to say? Maybe he'll get good at TikTok. Honestly, I don't think he will. Like, there's some popular Australian political figures on TikTok. So you got, like, Julian Hill from the Labor Party, Pauline Hanson from One Nation, and Max Chandler Mather from the Greens. They generally have a pretty big following. They post a pretty good mix of kind of, like, cheeky, relatable meme content, as well as actual videos of them in Parliament making speeches.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that pops off. Like, this Peter Dutton talking to the camera, trying to directly talk to a young person, doesn't fucking work, because that's an insane thing. Have you ever tried to talk to a fucking young person? They don't give a shit. I didn't give a shit.
I wouldn't give a shit.
Try sitting down and talking to a young person with no distractions when they could very easily pick up any distraction.
Sorry, about, like, housing.
Be like,
housing crisis.
renting. And it's like, yeah, I know, motherfucker. What do you think I'm doing? Or, I live at home, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I'm 13. I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's not my problem yet.
It's like,
give me a fucking minute.
hey, Lydia.
Like,
I know you're demure, but have you thought about property?
being mindful. Mindful of your property.
He's not good with tech. Did you read about when he accidentally texted a journalist?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The major fucking witch scandal.
Major fucking witch.
Essentially, while Peter Dutton was complaining about a reporter to a colleague of his, he accidentally sent the text where he calls her a mad fucking witch to the reporter by mistake. Classic goof. We've all sent a mistaken text message before. It's just really fucking silly that this is what he did.
He says he walked it back. He's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, yeah, she's a political reporter. She's heard worse. But
she seemed like she accepted the apology as well, and I was just like, fair enough, but like, come on now.
She's a reporter.
That's embarrassing. She works in that industry.
Yeah.
What's she gonna do? I don't forgive you, Peter Dutton, leading political figure in the field I work in.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a deal with the devil if you're a political reporter with Liberal Party sources or whatever. Like, if he has her number anyway.
Yeah, that's so fucking
Why
funny.
does he have her number? I mean, Peter Dutton seems like someone who would just, like, go down the parliamentary directory and import all the numbers into his phone.
Just ready at a moment's
Just
notice.
ready to call anyone.
I've got 2 videos that I do want to show you. This is kind of to wrap it up with something a little bit fun.
A little bit fun.
A couple of little things that I think, a little bit of cheeky Dutton content. So the first is, do you remember the Mr. Speaker debacle?
I read about it while doing research. He keeps calling the wrong person that.
Yeah, so in 2022, Dutton was making a speech to Parliament. I don't know what about, I actually don't care.
It doesn't matter.
And he referred to the Deputy Speaker, Sharon Clayton, as Mr. Speaker 18 times, even as she interrupted him to correct him. So I just want you to have a little listen to this.
In fact, Mr. Speaker, none worse, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, he is taking this government and our country down a dead end.
Could I just,
Mr. Speaker,
I'm just going to interrupt you. You
Please.
continue to call me Mr. Speaker.
I am not Mr. Speaker.
You know, and here's a pet peeve of mine.
Misgendering.
Yes. You're so right for that. Here's a second pet peeve of mine. When politicians have, like, I know it's in the, like, rules or whatever of decorum and parliamentarian behaviour or whatever, that they have to say Mr. Speaker all the time because they're talking to the Speaker. They're not technically, I guess, allowed to address other members. They have to, like, do, like, a fucking, like, you know, Mr. Speaker, can you please tell the member for Dutton Park that he's a big stinky poo head and I hate him so much. Point of order, Mr. Speaker, could you please tell the member for Booty Hills that she's actually, like, so stupid and dumb that
That her mom is gonna give her up for adoption.
yeah. Like, it just pisses me off something so severely. Like, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker.
Now,
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Her title's Deputy Madam Speaker. That's so much longer, though.
It is.
Deputy Madam Speaker, Deputy Madam Speaker, Deputy Madam Speaker.
Maybe they just stop fucking talking then if they have to say that all the time.
Sound like fucking auctioneers.
Just sends me a bit feral, to be honest.
It's terrible. Terrible parliament. Terrible way of doing things.
Bad content. Hate to see it. And here is one more. So Carl Stefanovic on the Today Show had an interview with Peter Dutton, kind of talking about, I guess, you know, immigration, the banning of visas for Palestinians, a whole lot of the kind of current issues that we've been talking about. And I was surprised. Carl actually kind of fucking goes in on him.
Go on.
For a hot
Hi,
minute
Pete.
there.
Good morning to you. Good to see it. Are you a heartless racist? Do you have any humanity?
I just think all the usual political try put it to one side. We can bring people here, we can be generous, but it needs to be done in the right way, and it just hasn't been done.
One final question. You obviously don't really care about the Muslim vote. They're not going to vote for you anyway, let's be realistic about it. But the perception of a leader who doesn't have humanity can have wider ramifications for you.
Well, Carl, it's just ridiculous. My interest here is in making sure that our national interest is served, and that is for every Australian, regardless of somebody's political or religious belief. I don't believe it's in our country's best interests to bring people in who haven't been face-to-face interviews haven't even been conducted.
He actually kind of like...
Yeah, he hits him. I mean, he's like, hey, Peter, are you heartless? Well, listen, you obviously don't care about Muslims, and they're not going to vote for you. But what are you going to tell them when they accuse you of being evil?
He's like, well, actually, I don't think we should make this a political issue. I'm just a politician.
He does look really close to being furious, like he's shaking.
Yeah, and, like, I think probably, like, the Today Show would have been a reasonably soft ball in most, like, political correspondence things. I just love seeing journalists just be like, actually, today's not the day. Today is not my fucking day. Come at me. I'm done.
He did seem tired.
He looks pissed off.
Carl has, like, the occasional moment. Like, the time he wore the same suit for, like, a month or whatever.
Yeah, to prove a point.
That was kind of funny.
Yeah.
That was pretty cunty.
Yeah.
I liked it. This is not a... I mean, Carl, come on the show. Come on the pod.
Yeah. Carl, big fan of the pod. Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, Carl. Come on the pod. We'll love to have you. I guess we'll wrap up about Peter Dutton now. He's around. What do you reckon, Dutton? Is he going to be around after the next election?
Surely. I think he'll just, like, linger like a bad smell, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, he might
like
get
a
worse
Horcrux.
sometimes, might kind of, like... Did you say like a Horcrux?
I said like a Horcrux.
Hell yeah. No, absolutely. He's just going to kind of lurk around, and then eventually some, like, bespeckled, scarred boy will kill him finally in a train station, and it'll be all over.
Or he'll finally be, like, primaried or whatever it is. He'll lose his seat, maybe.
Yeah.
Peter Dutton, yeah, we'll see what happens next. I actually think he's not going to last after this next election. That's my prediction. I think whatever happens this next election, I don't think Liberals winning it. Although it's a long time away. A lot can change between
What, now and...
next year.
Yeah. What, May or something?
Yeah, in like 9 months. 9 months is a long time, but
Yeah.
I think if the Liberal Party decided to, I don't know, support Palestinian people, that might have allowed them to use it as a wedge, and that might have been something that people might have not voted for Labour, actually. It was like, yeah, Liberal Party's saying we want to support them. Like, I don't think people are in general that stupid, but if you're not really paying attention, you could fall for that.
Yeah.
But they're not. They hate Muslims still. I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of like the real conservative independent taking seats as opposed to like the libertarian styles as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of something I find a bit exciting about, especially like with the Liberals losing a bunch of seats in New South Wales, like for local stuff. It's going to bring in, I think, a bunch of really fresh people.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be really exciting because I think that's also going to then go on to impact how things go federally down the line.
Yeah.
You know?
There's going to be, like, in both, I mean, especially in some safe Liberal seats, you could see, I mean, either side of things. You could see, like, okay, well, we're going to have to actually look at, like, the Labour or Greens party candidates seriously, or, like, someone further right than the incumbent Liberals member comes in and galvanizes, you know, whatever. Like, we're talking places that vote Liberal. They can probably be convinced to vote One Nation.
Yeah.
Pretty simply. There's a lot of talk about the suburbs versus the cities in this.
Yeah.
Australia's flyover states are the suburbs, and Peter Dutton speaks for the suburbs, but as someone who grew up in a suburb, Peter Dutton does not speak for me.
Powerful words. Powerful words.
The true heart of the suburbs is haired. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week to talk about Anthony Albanese. Hope you've enjoyed Shouldn't Come. Any last thoughts? Yeah, you have any plugs for us?
Yeah. I reckon PD Dutch should get some hair plugs if he's really keen. But
Plugs for Duts.
Plugs for Duts. Butt plugs.
Butt plugs.